That music starts again. I'm singing the encore. Now that it is June and temperatures not only are rising, but that they have risen, there's lots of stuff that is beginning to come into season. Just a little over a week ago, I had gone to Costco and they had some peaches. And I really love peaches. In particular, I've had some from California before that we'd gotten at Costco that were just delicious. And they had these flats of California-grown peaches, and I bought a flat of them. I brought them home, and it was late in the afternoon on a Saturday, and we were going to be having something where we could have peaches with them for supper. And so I began to start peeling some of these, and I'm eating really more than I'm cutting up, but I began to peel them, and Caroline said, go ahead and peel some more, and cut them up, and we can have those with whatever it was also we were having for supper. And so once I peeled it, then you need to try to get it off of that pit. And so I go to get a knife to start cutting it off the pit, and this particular one, when I do that, all of a sudden it just falls open. And like the pit itself is like broken in two, and inside there is a big living bug crawling around. I did not like him. And so I'm known for my funerals, and I quickly gave him one with the other half of that peach. And I was puzzled by it, though, because this peach looked fine. Everything on, I have no idea how that bug got in there. I'm still perplexed by that. I don't know how it got in there, but there was no telling from the outside that was going on the inside. Well, fast forward a few days later, and I have gone to Aldi, and Caroline had been talking, and one thing she'd asked me to get was a cantaloupe, and she'd been talking in days leading up to that she was really wanting a cantaloupe, just kind of craving one of those, and so that was on the list, and so I go to get one, and they're in a big box on a pallet, and as I see them, I think to myself, they don't look so hot, and I go to put my hand on one, and they're kind of slimy. And I get one underneath, and it's got this soft spot in it, and my hand kind of goes into it a little bit. I'm like, no, okay. And so I go grab another, and I'm thinking to myself, these don't look great, but I know that she's really been wanting a cantaloupe. I'll go ahead and get it. Doesn't look great, but I'll go ahead and get it. And at least that soft spot of this, maybe that can be cut off, and hopefully the rest of it is okay. Anyway, I get home, and I'm setting the stuff out on the counter, and Caroline sees this cantaloupe, and she's like, why did you buy that? And I said, well, they were all kind of like that. I knew you wanted one. She said, well, if I had asked for bananas and all the bananas were rotten, would you have bought those too? And no, I would not have bought those. But this was not a banana. This was a cantaloupe. And I said, honestly, I don't know anything about picking cantaloupes. I really don't. But I thought there's this soft spot that's on there. That part could be cut off, and maybe the rest of it is okay. And so she's like, oh, okay. And she peels this cucumber, this cantaloupe. She peels this cantaloupe and cuts it up. And she said to me later, she said, it was probably the best cantaloupe I've ever had. Well, duh. But there was no way to tell that. I mean, from the outside looking in, this is not one that you would have bought. Little kind of slimy, soft spot on it. This is not the cantaloupe that you would want, but it turns out it was like the best cantaloupe she's ever had. This peach that looks so great is one that I wound up throwing in the trash can because I had no idea there's a bug in it. And it's like, I think I should just go buy produce like this because there's just no way of telling. You know, I think sometimes we can carry that thought over to spiritual things. And I say all of that to give you this thought. Let me pose you a question. If you are here as someone who says that you have a personal relationship with the Lord, now that there's a time in your life in the past that you began a personal connection, a personal relationship with Him, let me ask you this. How is and what is the health of that relationship? Now, in asking that, I get and I understand this thought that each of us would have to say it's not perfect because there's not a perfect among us and there's not a perfect Christian walk, because we're all going to screw up some, right? We're all going to mess up. We're all going to have some stumbles and falls along the way. I get that. But taking that into consideration, what is the health of, what is the condition of the walk with the Lord that you profess to have? Now, very easily you could say, well, you know what? I don't know that there's any way to quantify that. I don't know if there's any way to fully answer that question, because for each of us, for every person sitting around me, for every person in this room, there's room for growth, there's room for improvement, and I could always do more, serve more, learn more, grow more, give more, do all sorts of things more. So maybe there's just no real way to tell. And honestly, I believe that there are a lot of people who profess to have a relationship with the Lord, and if posed the question, how is that? What's the health of that? They would say, it could be better, but I guess it's okay, because the thought is, I don't really know how to answer that. There's no real good way to be able to objectify, no way to really quantify and answer the question of what the health of my relationship with the Lord is. To that, I would say I beg to differ, and that's not the case. It is possible to be able to ascertain and have a better sense of how things are between you and the God that you profess to know. There is a way to be able to evaluate the health of, the strength of, the vitality of the relationship that you profess to have with the Lord. How do you do that? Well, there's a couple of questions I believe that we see given to us in a parable that Jesus shared in Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15. You're going to turn there, if you would, with me in your Bibles, and we're going to get to the text here in just a moment. But because the parable is long and we're not going to read all of it, let me just give to you the background of the story. We know this. You are probably familiar with this story as the parable of the prodigal son. And Jesus starts back in verse 11, and he says this. And I'm just going to summarize it so that we're on the same page. There was a father who had two sons. Obviously, one is going to be older and one's going to be younger. The younger son comes to his father and asks for his share of the inheritance. Perhaps you've heard this before, that it was not common, but it was not unheard of in the first century, that if you were entitled to a portion of an estate, before the testator, before the giver of that estate dies, you could effectively sell the rights to it. So let's say, for example, you were entitled to 100 acres of land. You could go to someone and say, listen, when my relative dies, 100 acres is going to be coming to me. At that point, it'll probably be worth $50,000 an acre. I'll sell it to you right now, the rights to that, for $30,000. So you go ahead and you pay now, and when the person dies, then it bypasses the actual heir and goes to you. So the younger son goes to his father and essentially is asking for an accounting of what is going to come to him, so that he might therefore go out and sell the rights to his inheritance. Now he's got a big fat wad of cash, and this money is burning a hole in his pocket. And we're told by Jesus in the parable, but a short time thereafter, he leaves his father's home and travels to a far country. He wants to get away from home. He wants to get away from the scrutiny of his father and maybe even his older brother's glaring eyes. He wants to be his own man. He wants to make his own decisions. Among other things, he wants to live it up. And we're told that while he is there, he squanders or wastes this money on what is described as prodigal or wasteful living. I mean, he is partying like it's 1999. Which just doesn't carry the same ring that it used to. Anyway, he is absolutely living it up, and he is burning through this money. And he is acting as though he could buy friends, almost certainly going into bars of the day and saying, hey, the drinks are on me. And he's developed a reputation as a partier. He's just burning through stacks of cash. To compound matters, a famine strikes the area. And when a famine occurs, the law of supply and demand kicks into place. And so the loaf of bread that used to be 50 cents now is $9.50 because wheat is now so scarce. And so the small reserves that he has, very quickly he goes through, and now he is homeless and completely destitute. And it seems in context that this would have been a Jew that winds up slopping pigs, which would have been the most vile, degrading thing that he could have done as a faithful Jew. And he looks at the slop that the hogs are eating and thinking, you know what, they have it better now than I do. I'd like some of the junk from their slop because I am starving. He's made some really, really bad choices. He's told his father, I'm heading out. The father doesn't stop him. He doesn't get in front of the door and say, over my dead body. He lets the son go. Does the father know that his leaving is bad? Yes. Does he know that the choices the son will make are unfortunate? Yes. Does he interfere to stop him from doing that? Absolutely not. That says something to us, doesn't it? Jesus is trying to communicate some lessons to us about the nature of a relationship with our Heavenly Father. There are plenty of decisions that God knows that you want to make and that you are tempted to make and that you may even want to make, that He says, hey, listen, that's out of bounds, that's off limits, you ought not make it. But is He going to stand in front of you and absolutely say, over my dead body? No. If you want to run away from God, He'll not stop you. But also, He'll not stop the consequences. So that this young man has made these terrible choices, and now he is faced with these terrible circumstances. And finally, we are told he came to himself. He hits rock bottom, and all of a sudden the lights finally go off, and he thinks, I have been such a fool. Why did I leave home? I had it how it could have been, how it should have been, back with my father. And he decides, I want to go back. I'm going to go back with the hope that somehow, some way, maybe he'll take me on as one of the hired hands. Maybe one of the servants can be my supervisor. Maybe, just maybe, Daddy will let me in under those circumstances. And you may be familiar with the story that he starts to head home, and it seems that the father maybe, and in my mind I picture this like a Western scene, and you've got this big front porch, and the father goes to step, and off in the distance he sees what looks like a familiar shape and outline. And very quickly he identifies that it is the son. And before the son can even get to him, he runs out and embraces him. And he doesn't come out to lecture him. He doesn't come out to beat him. He doesn't come to just beat him over the head with his words. He doesn't do any of that. He embraces him and welcomes him. In fact, as the son says, and as the son confesses what he's done, he says, no, I am no longer worthy to even be called one of your children. I've been so bad. My deeds have been so dastardly. My choice is so foolish. I'm not worthy of being called one of your sons. Could you maybe, just maybe, let me come on as a hired hand? And the father says, that's not going to happen at all. In fact, at that point, he says, tells one of the other servants, bring out a robe, put it on it, put a ring on his finger, go ahead and kill the fatted calf because we're going to throw a party. In fact, at the end of verse 32, he describes it as though this son who was essentially dead is now alive. This son who has been so lost now is home. Now, that whole prodigal living, bad choices, squandered opportunity, the description there in your mind may and almost certainly bring up the image of someone's face. Some of you may say it's your own face back when some years ago you did the same type of thing. Maybe some of you are here today and you would say, I can see that in the face of my son or my daughter who is still experiencing prodigal living. Maybe it's a coworker, a neighbor, but every one of us can identify people who have done exactly that. And so many times when we read this story, when we hear this story, we think about it in the terms of that God, for those that are His children, even if we run from Him, and even though He doesn't stop us, and even though He liberates us to experience the full weight of the consequences of our choices, He always welcomes us back when we come to Him. There's great application in that. There's wonderful news in that. There's great hope and great promise. But that's not the whole story. Because Jesus tells us a man had 2 sons. And I believe significant application has been left on the table because we forgot about the older son. Read with me what happens to him, beginning in verse 25. The party, the reunion party has begun. Verse 25 says, the older son was in the field. As he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he summoned one of the servants, questioning what these things meant. Your brother is here, he told him, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. And what does the older son do? Verse 28, he became angry. He did not even want to go in. So his father came out and pleaded with him. But he said to his father, look, I have been slaving many years for you. I have never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him. The father replied, Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours, but we had to celebrate and rejoice because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and now is found. There is, I believe, so much application in the second half of the story because I believe what we read there gives us a couple of questions that we can ask, that you can ask relative to your relationship with the Lord to say, hey, is this really how it should be? Or is my walk with the Lord in a position of health or not? Here's the first question. Do the things that matter to God matter to me? Do the things that matter to God matter to me? The party has begun. The older son has been out doing the normal routine. And let's say this, though. He's not been a bad kid. He's been the one that stayed at home. He's been the one that was working in the fields. He has been the one that seems to have been making wise and prudent and careful decisions, not foolish and foolhardy choices. And so looking on the outside, you would say that the relationship between the younger son and the father, that one is terrible. But the relationship between the oldest son and the father, that one's great until you pay attention to what's going on. This party has begun. The older son, who didn't seem to color outside the lines, who stayed at home, didn't make crazy, carefree decisions. When he discovers why there's a party going on, is he happy? No. No, in fact, the text tells us that he's angry. I mean, he is ticked. He's not indifferent. He's not thinking, this will be the first of many of those. It's not that he's callous to it. He has, and the awareness of the brother's return generates an emotional response. And what category does it fall into? It falls into the negative category. He is ticked. My brother's back. They're throwing a party. What is the meaning of this nonsense? Here's the question. The return of the younger son, did that matter to the father? You bet it did. The return of the younger son to the father, was this something of consequence? Yes, it was. To the older brother, was it of consequence? Did he care? Nope. In fact, to the extent that he cared, the only thing that he cared about was the fact that he showed up and they're throwing a party. He's ticked about that. the things that mattered to his Father, he could care less about. Does that not say something about his relationship with the Father? Sure it does. It has to. Now again, on the outside, looking in, you would say, well, this was the good kid. This was the good son. And things between he and his father, they must have been fine. They must have been great. They must have been hunky-dory. But when push comes to shove, looks are deceiving. And it seems that on the inside of that peach, there was a nasty little bug, wasn't there? How do we know that? Because that which was of consequence to the Father made no difference to the Son. All right, so what does this have to do with you and your walk with the Lord? Well, I think the parallels are pretty clear. Do the things that matter to God matter to me? I'm not sure how long or how many years now it is that I have been on Facebook, but for kicks and giggles yesterday, I looked to see how many Facebook friends I have, and I have 782. And I don't say that to brag, because there are some people, legions of people, who have legions more friends than that. You may be here this morning with thousands of friends. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of recoil at the distinction or the designation that Facebook gives by calling all of these people friends. Because you may have 10,000 Facebook friends, but let me ask you this. Just take my number, 782. I do not have 782 friends. Among other things, there's just not enough time in the day, not enough days in the week, not enough weeks in the year to be able to have relationships with that many people, where you could actually say, hey, this is a friend of mine and I am their friend. There's just not enough time to be able to cultivate and to have those as legitimate relationships, that many of them. But not only from a logical perspective, in terms of time, but there's another reason I would say that I don't have 782 friends, that all of these people are not necessarily my friend. And the reason I say that is this. I see all kinds of posts. I see what people, some of these 782, I see pictures of what they had for breakfast, what they had for lunch. I see how many items they bought with coupons at the grocery store. I see pictures of their dog. I see pictures of their vacation. I see funny memes or some cat video that they thought was funny. I see statements that they make about what's going on politically in the country or in the community. I see whether they like the weather or they're complaining about the weather. I see these things from so many people, and most of these things that I see, though I don't say it, do you know what I think? I don't care. I really I don't care. I mean, if you had a great time on vacation, I'm sure that's fine. But honestly, whether you had a great time at the beach or a lousy time at the beach, I'm not losing sleep over it, right? Whether you had great service at McDonald's or lousy service doesn't really matter to me. And I'm sure for me, rants that I put on about Walmart, there's stacks of people that don't care at all about that. And see, like what I'm wanting is for Facebook to give us some different categories. I want family member. I want coworker, classmate, acquaintance, or just I know who they are, and then friend. Because there's no way I have that many friends. And I can prove to you that I don't have that many friends because so many of them post things that I do not care at all about. That says something about my relationship with them, doesn't it? Because you know this, and it takes little imagination, it takes a little understanding to get this thought, that the more it is a person matters to you, the more it is true that the stuff that is consequential to them is consequential to you. Candidly, I've had far more conversations with my children about Pokemon than I ever want to have had. But I will entertain some discussion about this. Why? Because they matter to me. So relative to spiritual things and relative to your walk with God, let me, in that context, give you the question again. Do the things that matter to God matter to me? Let's think about both sides of that relationship for a moment. Think about it from God's perspective towards you. Do the things that matter to you matter to God? Can I just give you the words to an old hymn? Yes, He cares. I know He cares. His heart is touched with my grief. When the days are dreary, when the days are weary, the long nights dreary, I know my Savior cares. But I don't know that just because a hymn gives me a nice sentimental thought. I know it because He has asked me. He has asked of you, hey, the stuff that you care about, the stuff that burdens you, will you do something with it? Will you cast all that stuff on me because I care for you? The stuff that's weighing you down, will you give it to me so I can carry that for you? So does the stuff that matters to me, does it matter to God? You bet it does. Let's think about the other side of the coin. Does the stuff that matters to Him matter to me? Well, what kind of stuff matters to God? Well, I think out of the gate we have to say that holiness matters to God, because He gave us Old Testament, New Testament, be holy as I am holy. I want you to operate like I do. I think certainly it matters to God because He went to such great lengths to give us this. This is His word for me. This is His word to me. It matters to God that I hear and I give thought to what He has said and is continuing to say through this. I mean, it has to matter because relationships, among other things, are built on communication. It has to matter to God that I talk to Him, that it is some measure of a priority to engage in conversation through prayer with the Lord. But let's be honest, there's a lot of things. In fact, this book makes clear there's a lot of things that matter to God. And we could sit down, I could get a marker board, and we could come up with a whole list of stuff that matters to God. And you can figure that stuff out on your own. It takes little thought to be able to come up with that list. But here's the question. I think each of us has a sense, at least a very general sense, of a lot of things that matter to God. So here is the question for you to answer. If you know what those things are, and you do, would anybody that's paying attention to your life say that those things also matter to you? If a log of your time, if your calendar is showed to an objective third-party person, would they look at how your time is spent and say, you know what, it's pretty clear, stuff that matters to God matters to them? If they were to look at your credit card receipts or your check register, would they say that financially you're making decisions that indicate stuff that matters to God matters to you? Would they look at your family and the manner in which it is that you're parenting or grandparenting, the type of employee you are? If they looked at your life, would they say, hey, this bears fruit of the fact that things that are consequential to God are consequential to them? That question will reveal some specifics that say something about the health of your relationship with the Lord. Because the more it is that your relationship with Him is healthy, the more it is that He matters to you. And the more it is that He matters to you, the more it is that the stuff that is consequential to Him, it matters to you as well. So, how's your walk with this one you profess to know personally? How is your relationship with the Lord? What's the health of it? Well, do the things that matter to Him matter to you? But let me give you a second question, which is this. The stuff that you do, supposedly for him in his name, do you at all have an ulterior motive? Do you have an ulterior motive? You say, well, what do you mean by that? Look at verse 29. All right, so the party's going on. Older brother is huffing and puffing. He's mad. He's sitting outside stewing. He's out under the tree all by himself. I'm going to show him I'm not going to even go in. And so the father comes out to him and asks the question, hey, what's up? Why don't you come on in? There's much to celebrate. But notice the son's response. And this response says something about his relationship with his father. He says, look, notice the word slaving. I have been slaving. He doesn't say I've been working. I have been slaving many years for you. Hey, the dream I'm living is your dream. The pursuits I've been pursuing are your pursuits. The stuff I've been doing is your stuff. And I have been slaving for you for years. I have never disobeyed your orders. And what's happened? Notice the younger brother, prodigal living, gets a fattened calf. And he says to his father, I didn't even get the goat. So, Daddy, you're wondering why it is I am so aggravated. I have been a good boy. I have been faithfully staying with you, doing all the stuff that you want to, all the stuff that I didn't want to. I've been slaving away as a part of this household for decades. My entire life I have been doing this stuff for you. Now, younger brother decides, hey, I'm going to take the money. I'm going to sell the rights to the estate, and I'm going to go spend this money on booze and hookers. And he comes back home, and what do? You throw a party. But my years of faithful service, my years of sacrificial labor, I don't even get a goat. We don't even go to Chuck E. Cheese. I don't get this. Now, behind those words, obviously, there is, I believe, certainly some jealousy. But I believe there's more to it even than jealousy in those words. Because there is a very real presence that the son was doing what he was doing with the expectation at some point in the future there is a payoff. I've been slaving away, busting it for all these years. And I hadn't been doing this for nothing. But look, I don't even get a goat. You got to try that with your employer this week. This whole year I've been busting and I don't even get a goat. So just see how that goes. That says something to us about his relationship with his father, doesn't it? Now, let me ask you this. Was it good that he did not leave home? Yes. Was it good that he helped his father? Yes. Was it good that he busied himself in many of the things and accomplishing many of the things that the father wanted to accomplish? Yes. All those things are good. But what we're thinking about now is the motivation behind it. Because it is not simply to do the right things. It is to do the right things for the right reason. Because if the motivation is faulty, then the objective is spoiled. Why was he doing it? Because there was in his mind the thought that at some point payday will come. Our kids do not get an allowance per se, but that does not mean that they don't get paid for anything. For example, this has happened. In fact, it was getting ready to happen this morning. Peter, our 2-year-old, I don't know, I think his spiritual gift is shoe hiding. Have you ever had any of those? And his shoes, one of them or both of them, will wind up in the most unlikely of places. And you don't realize that they are in these unknown places until, for example, you're getting ready to walk out of the door to head to church, and you got a 2-year-old with just socks on. And so you start looking for the shoes, and you can't find them. You look in all the normal places, all the anticipated places, then you can't find them. And so this doesn't happen every time, but repeatedly Caroline has said something like this: I'll pay $1 to the first person that finds them. And then all of a sudden, we've got 4 Sherlock Holmeses that are looking through everything. And so they will be looking everywhere to find that shoe or to find those shoes because they want that dollar. Because they want that dollar. That experience of earning some money or gaining some money for doing some stuff has whetted an appetite to experience more of the same. So, for example, Caroline may have said to one of the kids, hey, go downstairs and bring up the clothes hampers of dirty clothes and bring them to the laundry room. And I have heard this question: what will you pay me? And generally the answer is, I will let you live. There are some things that you reward, and there's not always rhyme or reason as to why you reward this and not something else. But you know that from parenting, you know that from your experience in life. You don't reward everything. You can't reward specifically everything. You can't get a sticker every time you do something, not simply good, but every time you do something you should do. There are many things that you do, that you should do, that are good, and you do them for this reason: because they're good. This says something, again, about this eldest son's relationship with his father. He was doing lots of good things. But here is the question: why was he doing that which is good? Because he was looking to get something out of it. Do not misunderstand me. If you are a follower of Christ, there are lots of good things that you can experience. Chief among them is eternal life. But what I want you to understand is this: the Lord was looking for people to be followers of His. The Lord is looking for people to say yes to Him, not heaven. That when you say yes to Him, heaven comes as a byproduct. That when you say yes to Him, guidance comes, though that's not the specific aim. That though there are scores of blessings that come, the ultimate motivation is not to get those things. Rather, it's because the decision itself, all by itself, is good and right. The eldest son, though, was not operating that way. He was doing what he was doing because he was thinking, all right, I'm accumulating some indebtedness, and I'm looking forward to, at some point, the payday. Is it possible that you could be operating that way? In fact, entirely possible that maybe there are other people that look to you and say, hey, that's an example of what living like a Christian looks like. Look at all the stuff that they do. Now, whether they're working, whether they're retired, all the time that they spend doing church stuff, Jesus stuff, kingdom stuff, ministry stuff. Look at all the money they give. Look at all the stuff that they do. But the question is, and they can't tell this, but God can help you see it. Are you doing it because there is the thought that somehow, some way, payday is coming? What exactly does this look like? Let me give you one brief example in closing. You remember a guy in the Old Testament named Job. And you remember that, hopefully, long story short, God grants Satan the ability to come after Job in such a way that the only thing he cannot touch, the only thing that he cannot take is his life. And Satan takes full advantage of this and takes everything. And in short order, Job loses his big family. All of his kids die in a day. He loses his massive fortune in animals. They're all stolen. He loses his health to the point where his body is covered with boils. You ever had a boil? If you have, the thought of your body being covered in them, I cannot imagine a more excruciating existence. He's lost his stuff, he's lost his people, he's lost his health. He's got nothing except abject, unmitigated misery. But that misery gets compounded because there are three supposed friends who come along and they're effectively wagging their fingers at Job and saying, you know what, God's getting you because clearly you've done something wrong. So go ahead and fess up and maybe somehow that this misery might be mitigated. And Job's like, listen, I don't know what I've done. I've been trying to keep it between the lines. But you know what? As miserable as this is, and bear in mind, at this point, he's got nothing. No people, no possessions, no power, no property, no nothing. And what does he say to his friends? In Job chapter 13, he says of the Lord, even if he kills me, I will trust in him. That's not following to gain. That's not serving to get. That's not doing to receive. That's saying, I am with you simply because that is good and right regardless of the fallout. That's what a healthy, vital relationship with the Lord looks like. That doesn't mean that it is free from any stumbles or falls or trips along the way. So how about you? How is it that you would evaluate? And I get there's room for growth for everybody, but how would you evaluate? How, as God is speaking to your heart right now, would you evaluate your relationship with the Lord? You know, very easily, as I said at the outset, we start looking at this incident with the prodigal son, this parable, and we say it doesn't have anything to do with me because I haven't lived like that prodigal. Yeah, I've done some stuff that I shouldn't, but I didn't go crazy. And honestly, I believe there's a lot more application for a lot more people when we look at the eldest son. People that haven't just gone absolutely berserk. By many objective standards, it looks like everything is okay from the outside, when in truth, on the inside, there's real problems. So why do you do what you do? Is there an ulterior motive? The stuff that matters to him, does it matter to you? If you are seeing that things are not as they could be, if you are seeing and recognizing that things are not as they should be, what now will you do? Will you bow your heads with me? If it is that you are seeing consistently, if someone were to look at your life, they could not come away at all saying, truly the stuff that matters to God really matters to me. Let me just say that's a problem. It's not an irreversible problem, but it's a problem. That needs to change. Though you may not say this to another, you may not even tell your spouse this, because you'd be so embarrassed if somebody knew the actual truth. But maybe it is that you know, and certainly God knows, the ultimate motivation for why you do any or all the stuff that you supposedly do that's kingdom related. Has that motivation been because there's been the expectation and hope that somehow, some way, payday's coming? That when you hear those words of Job, though he slay me, though he would even kill me, yet will I trust in him. You say, hats off to Job, but that's not me. If that's the case, I want to ask you to do something today. Will you ask God to help you? I mean, the first step is realizing there's a problem. Will you ask God to help you? This is not something, the decision can begin now, but this is not a process that can occur in the moments at the end of a message. It can begin. The question is, will you just ask God for His help to get things where they should be? That your walk with Him is characterized by doing the right thing because it is right. That you're following God for no other reason than it is who He is, and that is good. Maybe you're here this morning and you would say, well, Michael, I don't know for certain. Or maybe it is that you know certainly that you do not have a personal connection with God in a way that we've talked about today. In just a moment, when we have a time for people to make decisions, folks may be kneeling at this altar praying or praying where they are. Will you step out from where you are and come share that with me and allow me to begin a conversation with you to help you experience what so many of us already have? If you're scared of that, will you please see me after the service and say, hey, do you have just a minute? And let's talk. Maybe the day is the day that God's leading you to formally connect with His church. Maybe there's a burden that you came into this place you just need to talk to the Lord about. But if ultimately you have crossed the threshold of faith and have a relationship with Him, answer this question. How's the health of that relationship? And after coming up with the answer, what are you going to do about it? Lord, you grant clarity to us in ways that no one or no thing else can. And you can help us see ourselves more clearly than even a mirror can. And Lord, it's entirely possible, if not in fact likely, that more than a few today have seen some things true of themselves that you've helped them to discover that aren't particularly lovely, that indicate there's some problems. Thank you, Lord, that they are not irreversible. And the good news is, if you would accept the prodigal back, certainly, God, you would accept the child that didn't leave home into greater intimacy and closeness with you. And so, Lord, as you are calling us to make decisions, I pray for our sake, but ultimately for your pleasure, that will follow your lead. We commit this time of decision to you in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm going to ask if you would